This is Jewish Spotlight, a weekly television program presented by Chabad Lubavitch of Long Island, featuring various aspects of modern Jewish life and Jewish culture. Now, here is your host, Rabbi Tuvia Teldin.
Shalom, and welcome to the Jewish Spotlight. We have a program tonight that you're going to have to put your seatbelt on and just find out a little bit about the individual that we have with us this evening to discuss about some very interesting topics. And I think you'll find that one of the more interesting insights into just the mechanics of human nature and what motivates a person and how does religion affect many different people in different ways. You know, we live in a big world, and we live in a world with people from many different backgrounds and interests. And of course, Judaism is seen somehow as being an ism, one of many isms. Isms that, of course, if you're interested in or not interested in. But sometimes there are people who find an interest in Judaism coming from a background which is very, very different than anything you might expect would motivate a person to have such an interest. Tonight we're going to meet such a person. We have with us tonight special guest, Mr. Tom Foley. Mr. Foley, it's a pleasure to have you with us tonight.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Glad to have you on board. I've been trying for months to have you here, and then today we finally worked it out.
Right.
You were able to find a free evening. Mr. Foley is a very successful businessman, very involved in the community in New Jersey. I understand you're on the board for Rabbi Herson, Mendy Herson, of the Chabad of Somerset County in New Jersey.
Correct. That's right.
And you have a very interesting background yourself, and I would like to have an opportunity for you to be able to share with everybody in our viewing audience exactly what brought you to be a member of Chabad of Somerset County, especially since you're not Jewish.
That's right. I think that's a lead-in question, and I'm glad you asked it.
Okay.
I've been waiting for 3 months for you to ask me that question.
Well, you finally got it.
I guess I have to start with my own childhood by saying that I was always spiritually inclined.
Yes.
Since I was a child. I was raised as a Roman Catholic and went to Catholic schools and even Catholic college, and I decided to become a Catholic priest, which I did. I entered the seminary, studied all the appropriate courses, and was ordained in May of 1963. I had a lot of problems with spirituality even as a priest. It's not that I had problems where I was being vocal about it. I meant it from the point of view within my own heart. I was searching for, let's say, the face of God, if you could say that.
Fair enough.
And as time went on, I left the Catholic priesthood, got a dispensation from the church to marry, which I did. And several years later, having become a hospital administrator and being very successful in that field, and I loved it. But again, you could see the spirituality again, working with the sick and the healing. It was about 8 years ago now, I guess, that my wife found out that there was a program in San Antonio, Texas, a conference actually, for married priests from all over the United States. And she was very aware of my restlessness, even at that time, continual restlessness for spirituality. And so I flew out to San Antonio and spent about 3 days with a number of people, all ordained priests who had left and become married.
Interesting.
And there's about 300 people there. And it was a fascinating experience, and I enjoyed it very much.
Did they all have a common interest for coming?
That's a good point. Their basic common interest for coming, except for my own, was to get together to discuss how they might influence the bureaucracy of the church in order to have a married priesthood.
That
was not my
exactly
interest.
your reason for being there. Okay.
Yeah, that was not my interest.
Yes.
And on the last day, it was a very interesting conference because you can imagine the kind of people that were there, very fascinating people.
Yes.
There was a huge gathering of people sharing business cards and phone numbers to say goodbye. And as I looked through the crowd, this older man walked up to my face, man with white hair, considerably older than myself. He came right up to me and he said, "Did you enjoy the conference?" And I said, "I enjoyed the conference, but it wasn't what I came here for. I came here for a greater feeling of spirituality, and there was more of a feeling of pressure on the organized church for a married priesthood." He said, "You came here for spirituality?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "You came to the wrong place." I was very disturbed by that. And as he kept coming closer to my face, he said to me, "My friend, you're in the wrong place. You should be studying with a Hasidic rabbi."
You're kidding.
And I looked at him, and I couldn't say at that time, and I wasn't sure exactly what to do. As he turned around laughing, went into the crowd, I never saw him again. At that moment, the crowd broke up, and there was a large book display. And it was a huge display of books on the Jewish Jesus,
Yes.
which I had never studied about. I bought them all. I bought obviously one copy of every one, had them shipped back to my home, and read them all. As I got into that, I realized that I had been missing something in Christianity, and that was its foundation in Judaism, but not just Judaism as a religion or a legal system with the 613 mitzvot, but it was deeper than that. There was actually an attempt, if you will, on God's part to meet with man and share a common existence that we knew through creation already had taken place.
And that perspective was something that was new to you coming from your background.
It was new to me in an intellectual sense, but very familiar to me in my heart, and I think that's what I was looking for.
Interesting.
And I sort of felt at home at
So
that
it struck a
point in
chord
time.
for you.
It struck a chord. And it was shortly thereafter, when I came back from San Antonio, that I was introduced to Rabbi Herson, who was a Lubavitcher rabbi that came to Basking Ridge. There was no shul, there was nothing. He had a condominium there. And we started talking. We became very, very good friends. And he invited me to study with him. So I used to study with, and still do, study with him once a week. In the beginning, it was a general study, and then we were right into the work of Tanya.
And did you get your answer?
Yes,
Through these studies?
I did.
So what was the answer you were looking for?
My answer, I guess, was to try to find God and what God meant in my own life. And not the old man on the cloud, not a being that was so far away from me, but I guess what I learned through Tanya and what I learned through Chabad was the oneness of all creation. And I guess I spent a lot of time studying the Shema, because the essence of what Judaism was for me was in the Shema.
Now, I just want to translate a few things also. The Shema, of course, is the Hero Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one.
Right.
Tanya is the book which is basically the main treatise of course, all Chabad, the Lubavitch philosophy written by the first Lubavitch Rebbe. Now,
Right.
my question to you is this. Are you planning on converting? Are you interested in Judaism to that point?
No, I must tell you, though, there was a point at which, because I was so thrilled with finding myself, if you will, and my spirituality, that I did talk to Rabbi Herson about that. And we both agreed that that was not the right way to go.
All right, so what path did you decide to go on?
My path was to find Tom Foley, the best Tom Foley I could be. And some people, as you know, might call that a Noahide, someone who is a Gentile, but follows Jewish beliefs as far as spirituality is concerned, namely the existence of God and how to observe that existence of God and how to worship God.
Okay, now you mentioned a word there, Noahide. Can you explain to our audience a little bit, because I think there's a tremendous lack of knowledge as to what that means, because people think of Noah, of course, as being the survivor of the flood. But the idea that there was a set of principles handed down from God to Noah for all of humanity after his time, for everybody, is something that most people, Jew and non-Jew alike, are totally unfamiliar with. So go into that a little bit, and let's start to elucidate on that point.
I would say that a Noahide is someone that accepts Torah even though they do not convert to Judaism. They are not bound by the 613 mitzvot that a Jew would be.
Right.
But it is someone that looks at life, the world, creation, as one religion. There is a universal religion. And because Torah was given to the Jewish people through Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher, they would see the Jewish people as the priests, if you will, the priesthood of this universal religion.
In other words, the Jews were basically the chosen people only in the sense that they were chosen to be the messenger of this
That's correct.
revelation to the whole of humanity.
That's correct.
That the Torah is not in no way meant to be just for the Jewish people. What
That's
happened in Mount
correct.
Sinai is meant to be for every single human being living
That's
on this
correct.
globe.
And I think that's what's misunderstood by people.
Definitely, very much
And I
misunderstood.
find it fascinating that if you look into the Christian Bible, and if you listen to Christian preachers, whether they be Catholic, whether they be Protestant, over and over again, they quote from the Torah.
Right.
Over and over again, they go beyond the Torah
Constantly.
into the teaching of the prophets.
Of course.
And so this is the foundation of all revealed religion. Whether we're talking about Judaism, whether we're talking about Christianity, or for that matter, Islam,
Right.
if you really think about it. And so I was really challenged by this kind of thinking, and I couldn't see myself converting because there was no necessity for it. I even, at one point, called myself a Hasidic Gentile because I went beyond just observing what Jews might observe as holidays, for example. But I took that next step and really believed I wanted to learn more about things like Kabbalah. I wanted to learn
Jewish mysticism?
Jewish mysticism, and I'm very interested in Jewish mysticism. As a matter of fact, this summer, my daughter and I are going to Israel, and we're spending
Really?
3 or 4 days in Sfat.
Unbelievable.
Because I'm a great lover of the writings of Rabbi Isaac Luria, the Ari.
That goes back 400 years.
It goes back 400 years, and I say to myself, you know, the thrill of looking back to a man like that who taught and had so many followers. And today I'm reading that stuff, and it means so much to me in almost the new millennium.
Now, is there a movement, I mean, I know there is somewhat of a movement, but how large is the movement today of people like yourself, and I'm not necessarily including you, but with the philosophy that you're talking about,
Right.
of being able to follow the Torah, identify the revelation of Mount Sinai, which was a revelation to 3 million people who stood on Mount Sinai at the time and heard God's voice.
Right.
When God said, I am the Lord your God, and thou shalt have no other gods before us. And of course, the rest of the 10 Commandments we believe were given to the Jewish people through Moses.
Right.
But we'll follow that revelation as a way of a personal lifestyle, a way of connecting to God, a way of their own personal spirituality. It's not something you hear about.
Well, let me talk about that in 2 different ways, because you asked that question in another way before, and I really didn't grab onto it. But Gentiles living a Jewish life, if you will, if I can use that in
Let's say a Torah life.
a Torah life, but still observing a Jewish liturgy, for example, reading Tehillim, the Psalms, is not new. You had it back in biblical times, but they had different names at that time. Ger Teshov, for example, a stranger at the gate. Righteous Gentiles
Right.
was used at that time and whatnot. But in the 19th century, an Italian rabbi by the name of Rabbi, I have his name because I never remember it, Benem Zoach, wrote a book called Israel and Humanity. And in there he talked about Gentiles following a Torah life and really being part of this universal religion. There's a book that's come out in this century by a disciple, if you will, of the rabbi. Ami Pellier wrote a book, The Unknown Sanctuary, that your viewers may find very interesting. I found it to be a fascinating book. And another thing that propelled me into what I'm doing today in the Jewish community, because Mr. Pellier was a seminarian and left the Catholic Church, well, he left the Catholic seminary, but the rabbi encouraged him to remain a Catholic, remain a Christian, as long as he did not practice idolatry in any sense of that term. It's a fascinating book.
If I can just jump in over there, I just want to clarify one point people might not understand. Becoming a quote-unquote Noahide does not mean negating your own personal religion necessarily.
That's correct.
In other words, Judaism is of the belief that there is Judaism for the Jews, and Judaism is not interested in converting people.
That's
Judaism
correct.
has never been a religion that goes out to try to convert
Right.
a non-Jew to become Jewish.
Right.
The Torah itself says that we are the smallest of all the nations, and we accept the fact that we remain small, and our role is not necessarily just to increase numbers.
That's
Our
right.
role is to be a light amongst the nations, to help to be a teacher of morals or values, of what the Torah is, or what the revelation of Mount Sinai was all about. However, if there is a religion, which many of the religions of the world are, which follow the Noahide principles, in other words, that religion is based on a foundation which is consistent with the Noahide teachings from the Torah, then that religion is considered to be, quote unquote, a kosher religion according to the
That's
Torah.
right.
And a person, from a Jewish perspective, a non-Jew would have a portion in the world to come for being an observant, whatever religion they might be.
That was exactly the teaching of Rabbi Benson Mark. A lot of people don't understand that.
For a lot of people, that's a very revolutionary thought, because
Exactly.
there are many religions where
Right.
if you don't follow my religion, you're going to burn in hell, or
That's right.
you know, you're not going to have the golden gates, or you're not going to have a portion of the world to come.
That's right.
Judaism doesn't claim to have an exclusive on the world to come at all.
That's right.
But it does lay out certain principles of what is right behavior, what is wrong behavior, and how we can all be in different ways, through different paths, be able to pray to the same God and
That's
reach the
correct.
same destination.
You asked the question, Rabbi, about how many people are there
Yes.
in this movement. I don't consider myself a part of a movement.
Okay.
But there are thousands of people across the United States.
Thousands.
Thousands of people across the United States.
Is
In the
there a
South
website
and in
for
the
such a
West.
thing? Is there a
Yes,
way
there
of-
is.
there
If,
is.
if you go into the internet and just type in Noahide, you will, and by the way, you spell it Noachide.
Okay.
And if-
Noachide, Noahide. Type that in, and you'll hopefully get a couple of sites. You'll find out about this movement. Good.
And it will go on and on. And,
Really?
And you can get a whole education in the afternoon, which I've done.
Okay.
And it's a fascinating experience. There's a Baptist, former Baptist pastor in the South by the name of David Davis, who gave up his Christianity. Now, as you said, that's not necessary to do what he did, but he felt so strongly that he announced to his congregation that he no longer was going to be a Baptist minister, but he was going to adopt this new lifestyle. And it was a Jewish lifestyle without converting to Judaism, and it was going to be called Noachism.
Interesting.
Now we have, well, half of his congregation obviously left, but half of them stayed, which is a fascinating thing to know about.
And to this day, there is such a congregation in Texas.
Well, in Texas, I believe he is in Tennessee or Georgia.
Tennessee?
He's in the
Okay.
South.
All right.
There are groups, Noahide groups in Texas. The phenomenon across the country has been over and over again that they have worked with Lubavitcher rabbis.
Right.
They do seek an orthodox approach to
Well,
Judaism.
The Rebbe, of course, came out with an announcement in the 80s. I forget which year it was, but a very strong announcement encouraging Chabad houses, encouraging rabbis, encouraging Jews all over the world to reignite this purpose of the Jewish people, to be a light amongst the nations. And the
That's
Rebbe said that
correct.
the way of doing this is, in fact, to teach the Noahide laws,
That's
and received a tremendous amount of criticism because of it. And the Rebbe retorted, saying, listen, this has been our purpose from time immemorial, just because of the fact that there were times of great anti-Semitism, times of pogroms,
That's
times
right.
when we were not able to do this because of the socioeconomic situations we were in. Doesn't mean that now that things have changed to a certain degree, we aren't back in that position where we have that obligation and should fulfill it.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, and we have to tell your viewers that this was not rehearsed, but the Rebbe's birthday every year seems to be, for Noahides, a very special day.
Really.
And I never understood that until the Rebbe's birthday this year, and I happened to know about it, and I went to his grave by myself, and I had a phenomenal experience there. And I would really encourage your viewers that can go to Brooklyn, to the Rebbe's grave, to do that.
It's a new Montefiore, I'm sorry, Old Montefiore Cemetery in Queens.
Yes, and it's there's a lot of people that
It's
will
a
welcome you
very
there.
moving experience.
There's a lot of very kind people there, and you actually write a letter to the Rebbe and destroy that over his grave, if you will. I asked him for some light, for some advice in this crazy life that I'm leading with a name like Foley, you know, walking around most of the time. in a Jewish group, I would wear a kippah, a yarmulke. And I left the gravesite and went through the little house to enter the street. And there was a television on. And the television just went on like in front of me. And there was a videotape of the Rebbe on his 80th birthday. And the message was the message that you just expounded upon.
Really?
And I was just amazed.
Unbelievable.
I
Just while you were
stood there
passing
with tears
by.
in my eyes.
Incredible.
And what he was really saying was that to try to convert someone is wrong.
Right.
But to try to teach someone the Noahide laws, how to lead a better life, and how to be a better person in the community, that's a mitzvah.
Yes.
And that's the difference between the two.
Yeah, now, question. Let's get down to the brass tacks. What are the 7 Noahide laws? Can you expound them for us?
Sure. The 7 Noahide laws are things that a lot of people are familiar with, but didn't realize that these principles, and they are principles, not laws, because as we had talked earlier in our conversation before the cameras went on, they're principles, but they can be expounded into a number of different so-called laws.
Right.
And the 7 general principles are not to blaspheme. And that could be translated into idolatry would be wrong. And this goes back to time immemorial. And this is something that Judaism has taught over and over again. Mm-hmm. And certainly it comes out of the Noahide laws. Blasphemy is another issue. Actually, I confused the two for a moment there.
Idolatry.
Idolatry is really saying that there's only one true God. And monotheism is really the essence of Noahism, as it is the essence of the universal religion that I'm espousing.
Yes.
And Judaism being the spokesman or the guardian of the Torah.
Let's get down to the others.
Blasphemy would be speaking against God's name or using God's name in vain. Murder. You cannot kill another human being. And today we probably need these moral principles more than ever. Sexual immorality, adultery, incestuous relationships. And it's really encouraging the family unit. And that is the positive aspect of that particular principle. You cannot steal from another person. And they say that in Noah's time, and probably the flood was brought on, not so much because of blasphemy, but because the way man treated man, stealing and murder and hurting one another. Cruelty to animals is one way this next principle is espoused or published, but it really says you shall not eat the meat of a living animal or drink the blood of a living animal. It's very close to kosher. And as a matter of fact, a lot of Noahites keep kosher.
Interesting.
I myself don't keep kosher strictly, but I will not eat pork products nor shellfish. And that's probably more in tribute to my Jewish brethren as a tradition that I've started in my own life than anything else. The most important, if you will, though, of all the 7 Noahide laws is the principle to form a system of justice among human beings. Because, as many of the Noahide writers say, you cannot have laws without someone who's going to make a judgment of whether or not people have followed the laws or not followed the laws.
Right.
So to establish courts of justice, for example, would be one way of espousing that principle.
I think from that principle alone, of the 613 mitzvahs, commandments that we have from the Torah, you could extract almost maybe 50, 60 mitzvahs that deal with what it takes to be able to establish courts of justice, a network of justice, how you have the balance of power, how to establish a community, because of course the Jewish community, being such a minority, is dependent on the non-Jewish community to establish a society which is a just society so that we can all serve a purpose and serve our higher goal.
Absolutely.
So it's a very important thing. In fact, for the Jews alone, we cannot fulfill all 613 mitzvahs today. We can only fulfill maybe 270 of the mitzvahs, because many of them deal with the temple times and other circumstances that are not available to us. And for the non-Jew also, there are perhaps 70 or so mitzvahs, actual mitzvahs. So there's only a different level of degree in terms of how many mitzvahs a non-Jew is asked to fulfill as opposed to a Jew being asked to fulfill. But we only have a minute left, Mr. Foley. I just want to ask you, your connection to Chabad and Lubavitch, what does it do for you personally? How do you relate to Chabad? Why do you have this special relationship that you even want to serve on the board of directors for one of the Chabad houses in New Jersey? I'm curious.
Well, Rabbi, I think I have a very simple answer to that. When I first met Lubavitcher rabbis and whatnot, and I talked about my quest for spirituality, I said I feel a kind of a loneliness in this quest because I'm not part of a movement. And in Chabad, I found a home. And as a matter of fact, a lot of the speeches that I give to Chabad groups is in Hebrew. And part of that
You speak Hebrew?
I speak a little bit of Hebrew.
Really?
I
Interesting.
speak a little Hebrew.
How did you learn Hebrew?
Because I felt it was important.
Excellent.
And I'm not a great speaker, but one of the things I always say is, Ani ohev Chabad, Ani babayit b'Chabad. Chabad,
you feel right at home in Lubavitch. Okay.
I feel very much at home.
That's great. That's great. Well, it's interesting. I think that all over the world you find that people who want to connect to that dimension of Judaism, or perhaps a dimension of themselves, to feel that spiritual presence, that they find more and more that Chabad Lubavitch is the place to feel at home. And of course, usually I say it in terms of any Jew who wants to feel it, but now I can say in terms of a non-Jew also who wants to feel that spiritual dimension,
Absolutely.
that they can find it in the teachings of Chabad, because really the teachings deal with life. They deal with
Right.
finding God in the most simplest aspects of our life, and finding meaning, that extra dimension, that higher authority in even the smallest detail of our life, and developing that God-given potential in so many different ways. So it's a wonderful gift.
I would say to you, and I would say to your viewers, that any Jew or non-Jew is welcome in any Chabad house. I've been to many, and I always feel at home
That's for
there.
sure. Well, Mr. Foley, you're welcome in my house anytime. I want to
very
thank you
much.
for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate you coming down and being a guest on our show. It's been fascinating, and I hope you continue to spread the light.
Thank you very much.
All right. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed our interview and our guest. But I think that there's a deeper message also here in being able to hear Mr. Foley, and that is to know that every person out there, whatever background you might come from, has the ability to really look a little deeper into yourself, discover something that gives that extra meaning in life. And if you keep on knocking on the right doors, who knows, one day somebody might come to you and say, you know what, you have to go to a Hasidic rabbi and you need to find out a little bit more about what it's all about. So to find out more what it's all about, why don't you write us or call us? We're at 58 Comac Road in Comac. The address is, their zip code is 11725, and our phone number is 462-7383. We have, of course, also a website at chabadalai.org, and 76 Super is the superphone. And I just want to tell you, based on what Mr. Foley said, there was a great rabbi, Rabbi Zusha, and he said, when I go after 120 years to heaven, I'm not afraid that they're going to ask me, Rabbi Zusha, why weren't you like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? What I'm afraid of is they're going to ask me, Reb Zusha, why weren't you the best Reb Zusha you could possibly be? Go out there and be the best you can be. Find out how Torah can help you and how Judaism has so much wisdom to be able to share. Take care and shalom. Till next week, same time, same station. All the best.